It is a video about a Lovecraftian card game, but it is not Arkham Horror, the card game. It is Mythos, which was a collectible card game from the 90s. Let's see what the date is. There a date on here? Well, I'll put, yeah, there is a date, 1996. And this was one of the first games that I tried to play and kind of make my own solo rules for. And that was a long time ago, but I recently reacquired some cards in a trade and put it together again and remembered sort of what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it, and it was pretty fun, so I'm going to share that with you here. I'm going to go over first just the card basics and then walk you through my very simple solo way of playing this. There are solo rules in the game. This is an example. This is the little rule book. Now, there were official solo rules, but I didn't actually find them in here. There are a bunch of solo rules online, which I've glanced at. Mine sort of, they're a little bit similar, a little bit different to some of them. They're not based on anyone's, but there's only so much you can do with the game in terms of creating solo. So I'll try to explain first the basics of what this game is and what the cards are. There are various, these are examples of adventure cards, and what you're meant to do, and also one blank adventure card. You can create your own, and indeed that might be an appeal to some people looking into getting this game now, because you could make your own adventure by building a thematic deck, and if that's something you like to do, that could be fun to do. But there are many pre-made adventures. These are just some of the ones that I have here, and they are little stories that will explain to you what needs to happen, what cards you must encounter during the course of your progress through the adventure. Now, you can encounter them in any order, but until you encounter all of them, so in this case a certain site card and catacombs, you will not be able to complete your adventure. And excuse me, in this video, the bulk of the video will show part of my attempt to complete the adventure of what is it called? A heroic rescue. So the adventure that we will be attempting is this one, and it is worth, you'll see a value here of how many points it is. The suggested campaign game is to pull together a minimum of 20 points of adventure. So for the game, the campaign that I was attempting here, I pulled together actually 22 points of adventures, and when I do this, I try to make them be a little bit thematic, kind of building up some sort of narrative. That's not always possible to do. You'll notice that the edges of my cards are a little different. I'll show you these. There were various sets released. This has come from something called the Dreamland set. I've got a mixture here of various sets, and the sets had common borders. Some of them can be integrated more easily than others. These brought the Mythos world into contemporary times, and in many cases are not able to be integrated because there's actually cards like there's an internet card, for example, and things of that nature that just don't really work. So I got these in bulk, and so they're all mixed together here, but I'm not using any of them in the demonstration, and I probably wouldn't ever actually play with that. Those are the adventure cards. So everything you're doing is to try to create this path through the adventure. Well, how do you do that? You have your basic investigator, and these are the only oversized cards in the bunch. Honestly, they're all pretty much the same. What is different is that some of them have a little bonus here at the bottom. She gets to basically discard some cards and get some new cards. That can be helpful. You are given a beginning sanity level and a maximum sanity level and a hand size of 13 cards to start, and a minimum and a maximum. And again, each card has two sides. You can see a little different values here. The education value doesn't actually come into play in solo play at all. And you've got your character picture obviously here. The other cards in the deck, you're working with allies that come to help you, and we'll get into this more when we see the card play, but the allies have a certain value which will help you in combat, and significantly they have a certain location where they can be found and played, and you can only play the ally at the location that is indicated there on the side. That's not an ally. Let's see. Speaking of locations, I will show you the location cards are very significant. There's a couple of different types of, well, there's many different types of locations. They have attributes listed at the top of the card. Some of the cards have this swirl, which is a gate to the other world, and those are places where more monsters will come out. And they also have some regions and specific locations written here on the side, and that's where you must match up your allies. They will have some card effects, or in certain cases just flavor text from the works of Lovecraft. Here's an effect. And also down the side they will have other effects. Some of them will give you sanity points, represented by the green hexagon here, and many of them will also take away sanity points. And then there are some icons here that indicate various things like attributes at the location. There's a water attribute. We'll see that coming into play in the demonstration. Forest, that indicates a cemetery, and that indicates it's an outdoor location, as you would expect here. So these are the location cards, and they are important, again, to be paired with the allies who come into play there. You also have artifact, what are called artifact cards, which can help you, benefit you. Some of them are weapons, as indicated here, will give you a bonus in your combat, and there are many different types of artifact cards. There are also spells and tomes, and within a tome you will find some spells, and that is indicated by the number here. So there are 3 spells within this tome. They are in German, and there are different iconography for the types of spells that you would find, and indeed each spell itself has an icon. So you could find this skeleton, this death spell, within this tome. So these must also be matched up. In order to use and deploy the spells, you need to have someone, whether it's an ally or yourself, who reads the language that the tome is written in. To use a tome, you need to, and to cast a spell, this is also going to cost you sanity points. And sanity is really the currency of the game, because once your sanity goes to 0, you are completely dead and the game is over. Now, of course, there are monsters. This is Lovecraft, so you are fighting various monsters, and they come in with a value number here that is a combat value, and many of them have different effects that will come into play as they potentially join with other cards to magnify the effects that they have. Some of them have restrictions, so for example, this one is only going to happen if it is well, actually not this one, but there are other ones that, for example, will only attack you if you're outside. And that gets to play into the attributes on the location cards that I mentioned earlier. And finally, there are events, and the events are typically negative, but sometimes they're positive. So this is an event that will allow you to travel between locations. And there are other events that will take away your artifacts, that will impact you in negative ways throughout the game. And try to show you another one. Here's another travel event. So for example, this is an event that you'll see in the gameplay I try to avoid. This police investigation will reduce your hand size. If you encounter this event, you will have your hand size reduced. And so as you travel through trying to fulfill the adventure, what you are doing is you are encountering various locations, and you are encountering events when you travel and monsters when you travel. And this is your adventure deck. It is pretty easy to set this game up for solo play. What you need are 2 decks, which represent collectively the threat deck. One is simply events and one is monsters. And every time you are traveling in the context of the game, you are pulling at least one event and at least one monster. And when we get into the demonstration of the gameplay, I'll explain how or when you might be pulling more than that. The thing that takes a bit of time is to construct your adventure deck, which is the third deck that you will need to play the game, and indeed it is the deck from which you are drawing your hand of cards and playing cards and moving through to try to fulfill the adventures that you have chosen. So the first thing you need to do after you've chosen the adventures that you want to fulfill is to make sure that you select for your adventure deck at least 2 copies, maybe 3 or maybe 4 maximum, copies of each card you will need to fulfill your adventure. So for example, here, the 2 cities and a tale, you need to begin in a Kingsport location. If there's no Kingsport location in the adventure deck that you create, you're never going to be able to fulfill this adventure. So depending on how many cards you have and what they come from in terms of the actual game itself, it may take you more or less time to pull these things together. So a minimum that you want to do is to make sure you have all the cards you need for your adventures, at least 2 copies, maybe more. And then after you have that, you need to populate the rest of your adventure deck with a variety of tomes, spells, artifacts, and allies that are going to help you to, and locations, help you to travel through and fulfill the adventure. Now, I mentioned, and we'll see this in the gameplay, that each of the cards, or the majority of the cards, are going to work together with other cards. So I think the parlance of this game, they call it joining. You want to make sure that if you have a particular ally card that you need to fulfill your adventure, that you have a location that the ally can be played in. Because if you have an ally card that you need for your adventure and that ally can only be played in New York, and you never bring in a New York location card, even if you don't need a New York location card for your adventure, you simply won't be able to play that ally. So that can take a bit of time depending on what you are working with and how you come across these cards. Now, there are I'm just showing you there, if you're trying to acquire this through trade or the used market, you'll see there are starter decks that were published. Then there were various, well, this is also a Dreamland starter deck. So these are the cards that are from a totally different set that bring in different dimensions of the world, I guess, and they have the rainbow background. These can be fully integrated with each other. There are other sets. There's the set I mentioned that takes it to contemporary times. I don't think I can show you that. I think well, you know what? Maybe I do. Let's see. Just so you know what you're getting. This is an example of a booster set from the newer version, and by new I mean chronologically in time, the more modern version of the card set that doesn't necessarily integrate well. I think some of the cards can, but some of them are just too anachronistic to really work. And there are also other booster sets like this, the Dreamland booster here, and then these expansion sets here, the Miskatonic University set. These are all fully integrated, but depending on what you're working with, it can take a bit of time to put together an adventure deck that will work for you in terms of making sure that each of the cards that you have has potential to work. I like to try to make sure that each card I pull can work in at least 2 ways. So for example, it can be played as a location card or an ally on a location card that can then have a weapon, but also perhaps fulfill the requirement of a different adventure, so that as you're scrolling through your deck, you are not necessarily limited to just one use for a card, because that can make for a very long game and really subject you to the randomness of the card draw. If you're waiting to get, a particular this famous author card and it's way at the bottom of your deck, you can just simply lose because that never comes up. So that's why you need to have multiple copies of things to give yourself a chance to not only win the game, but to actually play the game. In terms of that, I will also say the other rule that I play with is I have these 4 adventures out, and what I am doing is based on my initial hand, which is of 13 cards, I am deciding which of these 4 adventures I'm going to pursue. Now, this differs significantly from the standard rules where you can potentially be pursuing all the different adventures until you fulfill them. In the way that I play, you are directed to fulfill one adventure path until that is fulfilled and then go on to another one. If you deviate from that, you do so at the cost of sanity. So you can play a card for another adventure to another adventure while you're in the middle of one, but you're going to be paying for it with sanity. The first time you do it, your first adventure you open up in addition to the main one, you're going to be paying an extra sanity cost per card, and if you deviate further, then it's 2 and up to 3. And this can, it really can't, it sort of prohibits you from really having 3 or 4 active adventures because you just don't have enough sanity to be throwing it away like that. But occasionally you might want to get a card out into another adventure, and that is the cost that you will pay for doing that. But short of that, the way that I have, at least the way that I always had been playing this, is you're really focusing on one adventure and then you're moving to another one. And you'll see when we get into the gameplay, when I have completed an adventure and when we start the gameplay, I have already completed one adventure, I turn that card upside down, and underneath that card are all the cards from my adventure deck that have fulfilled the adventure that are no longer in the game. And that is where we pick up gameplay after I have fulfilled one adventure and I am attempting this heroic rescue. We are in this sanitarium here in New York, and we haven't yet committed to an adventure, but I'm going to commit us to this heroic rescue because for that, among other things, we need to encounter the wife card, and I see that we have the wife card here in our hand. The difficulty is she can only be in Providence. We're here in New York, and while we do have a Providence location here, we don't have any way of getting there because we don't have any travel cards. So what we're going to need to do is to remain here in this sanitarium for yet one more turn, which is going to mean pulling an event and a monster to deal with, and hope that after that turn we pull into a travel card. As we, by necessity, need to remain in this location for one more turn, per the rules I'm playing with, we have to deal with an event and one monster card again in this location, and that will then conclude our turn. So the first thing we need to do is pull the event card. We pulled a phobia, agoraphobia, and it affects, again, when it says opponent's investigator, that means you. So basically we have picked up this phobia, fear of open places. At the beginning of your turn, lose 1 sanity point if the top card of your story deck features the outside attribute. Well, here what this means is, rather than reading it as top card of story deck, I mean current location. That's how I would play that. So we are taking this phobia into our play area as it is, and we are carrying it with us until we can somehow discard it, and we're going to have the effects of it, but it says at the beginning of your turn. So we're in the middle of a turn right now, so basically nothing happens yet with that event, and then we need to pull the monster card to deal with that, and we got a pack of rat things with a value of 2. And there they are, and it says add 1 point to the value of this card if your opponent, meaning you, is in any inside location. It would also join other rat things. Well, indeed we are inside. We are in the sanitarium, so unfortunately this is going to become a value of 3. And as we have no one deployed to help us fight, we need to take the 3 sanity hits, bringing us from 15 down to 12 sanity, which is where we will reside for now, and then we discard this monster card into our discard. Now, again, we're keeping track here of 2 different monster piles because, in effect, we did not defeat this, we were defeated by it. The ones that we defeated go into the defeat pile, and ultimately they will count toward this 20-point worth of monsters that is required to be defeated by this particular adventure. but these points we would not get because they in fact defeated us, and we took the wounds from that. So that concludes this turn, and then the next stage is to see whether there's anything we want to discard from our hand, and then pull back up to 7 cards to see if in the next turn we can get anywhere. Now again, what we're trying to do at this point is to find a location, a travel card that we can pull that will allow us to get to a location where we can deploy our next ally. So I'm going to take a look here and just see what we've got. We want to, I'd like to keep this weapon if I possibly can. This ally is who I want to be able to deploy, so, excuse me, I definitely don't want to toss her, nor do I want to toss my Providence location because I need to deploy her in Providence. So this leaves some other options for tossing things out, and again, however many I toss out is however many I'm going to be able to pull in. I've got a maximum hand size of 7, so 1, 2, let's see, I'm going to keep this ally and artifact, and well, this is a gate location, so a gate location is going to potentially bring us a lot of monsters to fight. So given that, I think I'm going to hang on to some more artifacts and allies. Maybe I'll just discard this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, I want to pull in more cards than that. I think I'll get rid of this ally also because I don't have a cemetery anyway. So that's getting rid of 2 cards, and yeah, we're going to discard these 2 cards, and then we'll pull back up to get 2 more and see if we get something that we can use, which we did. We got an event and a location, which we don't really need. So now we're back up to 7 cards, and we can start the next turn. We'll just remind ourselves here what we're trying to do is to play out the reporter, doctor, private eye, and wife ally. And what we've got currently that we're working on is getting out the wife ally, who is right here, and she can be played in a Providence location, which we do have. It's a gate location, and we need to travel to it. So we did pull the event card, which is a travel card, the last turn, so we're going to be playing that, and that will enable us to travel to the Providence location, which is in the same region as the New York location. That's indicated by the same color here. So we're coming to the Providence location, and a couple of things are going to happen. First of all, it's going to cost us 1 sanity to get there, so we're going to go from 12 down to 11, and then let's see, this is a house in the city. We could play tomes and artifacts here, and so we will move. We'll just indicate that we have moved here, and what we're trying to do is to play our ally here. And Roby Harris, the steadfast wife, she knows English and French. She adds 1 point to her card's value when either Mercy Dexter or Anne White is in play. Well, unfortunately, we don't have them, but she's a 2 value card here in this location. So per the rules that I'm playing with, again, we're going to need to, we've traveled. So when you travel, you have to deal with an event, and you have to deal with some monsters. Now, this is a gate location, so as a result, for a gate location playing on the quote-unquote easy mode, I'm rolling a 1d6 to determine how many number of monsters come out. Not number of monsters, but monster values come out. So just to refresh you, here are some monster cards that are in our defeated category. So what we're looking for once we roll our d6, well, let's just roll the d6 and show you we rolled, well, we only rolled a 2, so that's great. So we're pulling up to or over the number 2 from the monster deck, which is here, and we'll see what we get. Well, that's it. We just got the 1 card. So we are at a 3, which meets the requirement, and we've got some night gaunts that we're going to deal with. It says each night gaunt surviving to affect your opponent's allies or investigator also carries off one random defending ally. Well, that stinks. So if we lose here, we are going to be losing also our defending ally, who's this lady who is the wife that we need. And this indicates the importance when you're building your deck of placing more than one card of the type required for your adventure, because if I only had one wife in my adventure deck, once this happened I could never complete that adventure, assuming I lost. So you want to try to mitigate that by populating your deck with at least 2 of the card type that you need to fulfill part of the adventure, possibly more, not more than 4 though. So we have a 3 value here, and our ally is here at a 2 value, and let's see, we do have an artifact that we could play here. Can we play an art? Yes, we can. So we're at a location where we can play an artifact. We do have our revolver, so we can equip her with a revolver, which gives her the value of 4 that we need to defeat these night gaunts and preserve our sanity and preserve our ally in this case. So that worked out pretty well for us. Had we rolled a higher number on this d6, we might have been in trouble. So let's just give an example and see. Say we had rolled a higher number and we had to deal with, say, the skeletons also. Well, that's a low card value, so we'd still be okay at a 4, but let's say we rolled higher, well, then we would have been in trouble. So I'll just shuffle these back into the deck. But so that's an example of how the gates can potentially harm you, because if you roll a high number, you are in more trouble. And again, playing on the easy, you're playing with a 1d6. A harder game would be either using a 1d8 or 2d6s, and of course you could play with a 1d10 even if you wanted to do that. One point to mention as a cleanup from that turn, I forgot that I've got the agoraphobia phobia currently, which is my losing a sanity point when I am outside. And of course, traveling from from New York to Providence by car, I am outside. So my sanity actually needs to go back down to 10 just to clean that up from before. So at this point, we've exhausted all we can do here at this location, and we are looking at, we're in our hand here, we've currently got an ally who can be played at Arkham. We have a weapon that is a pretty good weapon. It adds 6 points. And we have an Innsmouth location here. That's a cemetery location. And I don't think the cemetery comes into play with a different event. Well, actually, you know what? I'm wrong. Here we are. We're doing a heroic rescue, and in the end, we do need a cemetery here, so we certainly want to hang on to that card, I suppose, although it's going to be taking up a slot in our hand. So these are some of the decisions that you make in the game. You know, it's not terribly complicated, but there are some choices to be made. And the choice right here really is, what are we going to discard? We're going to be drawing back up to 7. We're going to be dealing with new events and monsters coming in, and what do we want to move forward with? Is there something that we don't need? Is there something that we do need? I could potentially just keep all of these and draw simply 4 cards, and that's actually, I think, what I'm going to do. So I'm going to draw my 4 cards here. I'll just show you from the draw pile. Drawing in the 4 cards. We get, all right, we get Mrs. Sonia Lovecraft. Now, she is Lovecraft's wife. She is in our deck because of a different adventure here that we are playing. This is the adventure of 2 cities and a tale. Now, per the rules that I play with, you are playing out one continuous adventure until you complete it, unless you take some sanity damage to play a card to a different adventure. So if I wanted to play Sonia, and she can be played in New York, I would take some sanity damage for doing that, and I have to think about that. But anyway, I pulled her, so that was 1. I'm pulling 4 cards. Secondly, I pull an event. That's great. This is a travel card. I would need that for sure. And pulling Houdini, another ally, another New York-based ally. So this is telling me perhaps I want to focus on going to another adventure and playing these out there. And then the last card I'm drawing here is a corrupt cultist ally. He can be played in Providence, and he does us some damage, but he is also part of an adventure, and I think he's actually part of the adventure we're trying to do right now, which we are. So he needs to be found in the cemetery, so actually that's working out pretty well for us, as it turns out. So I'll take a look at these cards and see what the next turn would be. So a few points here to clarify, and it's not actually looking as great as I had originally thought. First of all, this travel card is not going to work for us. I populated my deck with it, not realizing, not reading the fine print, as it were, that this is only used if you're traveling to a different region. And in fact, all of the location cards in this deck are in the same region. So this is completely useless to me, so I'll just have to discard it and get another one. That's too bad. And then I also realized that the ally here cannot be played at the cemetery location because you can see that they are not in the same place. So the question is, which do I hold on to? I could hold on to both and see what type of card I get. The other point is that the idea of playing out Houdini and or Sonia, both of whom come from the other adventure at the cost of sanity, is not great because my sanity is only at 10 at this point. We start out with 20, and this can go south pretty quickly because I would need to pull in another sanitarium or some other location that's going to build back some sanity, perhaps a spell. I'm not sure if I have any of those, or else I could potentially lose. So I can't afford to be giving away sanity points to play these cards at the cost of 2 sanity points per card to go to another adventure. So this leaves me not in as great shape as I had thought. My options are to basically discard down and draw back up some cards and see what I get that's going to be more effective. I'm definitely obviously going to be discarding this. I think I'll just take a chance and discard the 2 characters from the other adventure because I'm not going to be able to pursue that. I'll keep the cemetery and the ally even though they don't match up. So that's 2 cards in my hand, and let's see. I like keeping this ally around because this police investigation card, that's a tough one to deal with. I don't like that. And again, this is a great artifact to have if I end up fighting a lot of monsters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's going to allow me to draw 3 cards. The question is really, do I get rid of this? Playing on the easy mode, as I am for this demonstration, can be a little bit easy because the monsters, if you're rolling pretty low, you're just getting 1 or 2 monster cards. It's not so bad, but if I give this away and then I get a gate and I roll 6 points of monsters and I end up pulling in more than 6, I could really be in trouble. So I don't know whether this is worth the 1 extra card. I think I'm actually going to keep this. So I'll discard these 3 and I will draw up to 7 now, and we will see what we get. So let me just show you. I'm drawing here from my adventure deck here, and we'll see what we get. We have a spell, and I think this is the first spell we've seen possibly in this video. It will reduce the attack of a greater and lesser servitor by 2 points per monster card. Well, that's pretty good. It does cost me 1 sanity to cast. Now, when you play the spell, when you place the spell, it costs you nothing. It's when you actually cast it. But that's pretty good. We may or may not need it, though. It's not really what we need at the moment. Now we have an ally. This is a steadfast sister. Oh, here's that Mercy Dexter we were talking about. She will add, you get a point to her value, which is 3, if either of these are in play, and Roby Harris is in play. So Roby Harris is still there somewhere, so that's pretty good. And we have the North Burial Ground. Oh, in Providence. All right, so that is the cemetery that we can't, it's funny. I shuffled these cards pretty well, but even I think these don't seem like they're shuffled very well. I really did shuffle them. So we can play our ally here, where is the ally here? Not her. We need this guy Gomes. He can be played at the Providence location, cemetery. So that's what we're going to need to do. Now, this is a gate, so we have to figure out what's going to happen there. But that is definitely our next move, is to play these two cards, move to the cemetery, and play him. Now, move is key because I do not have a move card. And again, this is where the luck of the game and the way you build your deck really comes into play, because if you're stuck somewhere, you're stuck somewhere. You can't go anywhere. And every time you stay in a location for another turn, you're still going to have to be drawing in at least one event and at least one monster card. So there are two options. One option is just to do that. The other option is to give up a sanity point and shuffle back in. This is my discard. Now, I know in my discard I have, well, this is the useless one, but I do have some move cards that I use. Of course, I'm not seeing them now, but they're there. Of course, there's move cards in my deck too, because I built the deck with the move cards, so I could just hope to keep drawing them. And that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. So I think I will stay in this location and just do the best I can to deal with, I've got 5 points here already, and just deal with what is coming. So let's just pull the event and see what it is. We have this Cthulhu Rising. Did we just get this? Your opponent must discard his or her current location if it features the water attribute, otherwise bury it, then bury this card. You know what, that's not good. That is the water. Let me just confirm that. Indeed, we are at a location with an event. So this is not good, because we needed this for our adventure, but we do need to discard it per this event. Now let's see. So indeed, this is a water attribute at this location. So we need to discard it. Now, in this case, excuse me, discard means it goes into our discard pile, so it potentially could come back to us if we pay the reshuffle cost. But in any case, we need to discard it for now. Whoops, I discarded the wrong card. We need to discard this location for now, which is not great. And we're also taking 2 sanity damage. And you can see now we're down to 8. So this isn't great, because right now I have no way of getting anything back, and then we are getting rid of this card. And you may say, well, now we're nowhere. That's true. I mean, we are nowhere. I think you could possibly just put it sideways to indicate it's going to be discarded or whatever. But in any effect, the effect has taken effect there, and we now still have to deal with a monster because we were standing in this location, and therefore we have to deal with this serpent people who are coming. Joins with other serpent people and with weapons. Well, that is irrelevant to us here. Here are the serpent people. They are worth a value of 3, but we are easily going to defend against that with our current value of 5, so that's really a nothing for us. But the turn itself was not great because we lost this location, and that's what's going to happen next. I'm just going to leave this card there to indicate basically it's tapped out. Nothing can happen. We can't do anything here. We're just sort of standing there waiting. Really, we're looking for a travel card at this point. And so now it is a matter of discarding our, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 7, right? Discarding down and drawing back up and hoping to get one. And, you know, again, luck-based, and so sometimes these things happen. So I'm just going to do this off camera and come back and show you what I decide. This was actually a pretty easy decision because I'm going to discard Mercy, because the benefit to Mercy, I mean, she is a 3 ally, but the benefit to her also is really when she plays with Roby, and Roby is kind of nowhere, so I can't add to that location. So she's going to be out. The cemetery I don't need is going to be out, and I'm just going to get rid of this detective. I may regret that, but getting rid of that, keeping the artifact, the knife, the spell, and of course my 2 cards that need to work together to partially fulfill the requirements of this adventure. So I'm going to discard 3, and I will draw up 3, and we'll see what we get. We got a tome. We have a tome here, which would be necessary for that spell, perhaps. We got another spell, and we get to summon. This is good, but no travel cards. And we get another tome. This is leading me to think that my deck is not really sufficiently shuffled. In any case, we are stuck here again with very little possibility of movement or doing anything. All we can really do, again, take another turn. We have to face an event. We have to face a monster. Same situation. This event, high noon. It is now day. Bury any night or day event in play. At the moment that this card is played, all corrupt allies with weapons are flipped face down. Well, this doesn't affect us really at all because, well, it is day anyway, and that really has no effect. We'll check out this monster. It is a Baya key. That's unfortunate. The value would be 6 when this other card is in play, which it is not. Can only affect allies and an investigator at an outside location. You know what? We're not in an outside location. If controlled, can be used as travel by air. That's good, but irrelevant also. We're in a house. So that actually, we would have taken a sanity point there, but we are, that's irrelevant. So it doesn't count that we defeated it, but it's just an irrelevancy. And now I'm going to discard back down, basically just looking for, at this point, I'm just looking to get a travel card. So I'm going to be a little more aggressive in what I discard down to, keeping 3 and discarding most of what I just picked up. And we'll just speed this up a little bit. Got another location. There's a travel. Another location. And another travel. All right. So such as it goes, we have what we need for the next portion of the trip. And we'll take a look at that and decide where we're going to go. Well, we can see now here it was wise that we ended up hanging onto this artifact, and I will explain why. What we're going to do is we're going to travel by train to the North Burial Ground in Providence, and we're ultimately going to meet there our ally Gomes, and that's going to be a partial fulfillment of the adventure. I suppose we could travel by car too. It really is, in effect, the same thing. So, however, when we get to the cemetery, not surprisingly, it's a gate location. So we're going to be facing a whole bunch of monsters, or potentially a whole bunch of monsters there, and the only ally we have at this point is Gomes with a value of 2. However, so if he was alone without this weapon here, you can see that that would be a different story, whereas he's going to be an 8 value standing there in the cemetery. So let's take care of doing that. Now, once we do that, we will get rid of and put in our discard pile this location, which is unfortunately no longer going to be counting directly toward our goal. Actually, is it anyway? You know what? The city is not part of this anyway, so that doesn't really matter. In any event, so what we're going to do is we're going to travel by train from that place to this place, the cemetery here. And when we get here, we will have Gomes there, and we will have Gomes there with his weapon. Let's see. Add 6 points to the ally's value, 1 weapon per ally. Okay. So this is what we've got. Now, in order to do this, we have to draw an event. We also have to roll 1d6 to see how many monster value cards are going to be lurking around this gate location, the cemetery. And we rolled a 1. Listen, I'm going to re-roll this to make it a little tougher, just to show you something that might potentially be more interesting. I did actually roll a 1. I'm going to roll something again and see. We got a 4. Again, this is the easy play. Maybe I should be doing a D8. In any case, let's check out the event first. The event is a black galley ship. Target player must choose either to bury a corrupt ally, or discard a steadfast ally. All right, here's the problem. Here is the problem. We have both. We have the steadfast ally and the corrupt ally. We need them both to fulfill. We need the wife, and we need this cultist who's at the cemetery to fulfill this adventure, and we've only got 8 sanity left. So perhaps I was hasty in changing my role to face more monsters, because this is not actually looking so great. I think I'm going to go with discarding the wife, because she can be played basically anywhere in Providence. He can only be played at, or the corrupt cultist for the adventure must be played at a cemetery. So that's a little more specific. And I, again, don't remember how I built the deck, but I feel like I have more Providence locations than I do have cemeteries, because the Providence locations could also fulfill other adventures. So I'm going to discard her as a result of this event. That's quite unfortunate. And now, based on my reroll, drawing up to the value of 4 monsters here lurking in the gate in the cemetery. And we have these not cool looking things. Add 2 the value of this card if your investigator is underground during combat. We are not underground, I don't believe. I'll confirm that. And we have to draw 1 more, because that's only a value of 3. So we're also going to face, and of course now it's getting rough, we're going to face this monster here. A value of 4. This is a lesser servitor. Now I had a spell. Yeah, see, I tossed it. I think I had a spell that might have let me deal with that. Let me just go back and look at my discard to show you. Yeah, I did. You may recall I discarded this spell the last turn, I think, or 1 turn before, when I was waiting around for a travel card. That would have reduced the attack of this by 2, and that's unfortunate, but it had been discarded, so that's not great. So basically the way this is going to work is that we have a defense of 8, and, well, you know what? Actually, we have a defense of 8. It doesn't really matter. And we've got 7 against us. So we just, by 1 point of strength and defense, have actually outwitted or defended ourselves against these monsters, even without benefit of the spell. So we're actually good to go here on that point. But overall, not so successful, because we've taken a couple of steps back here in fulfilling the adventure by losing that ally. And again, we're at 8 sanity only. I don't think there's anything else I can do at the moment. I do have another travel card in hand, and I have a couple of locations. Actually, it's the same location. So you know what? I think I'm going to discard 1 to draw up to 7. I'm going to draw 5 cards now, and I'm just looking at this point to fulfill more things from my adventure, and or also to get another Sanitarium card. I could, however, travel back here, I suppose, and gain 5 sanity points by doing so, because I have that travel card. Let's see what we get. We're getting a location. That's 1. Artifact, a weapon, 2. Another location, 3. Another location, 4. And another location, 5. These are all, a lot of these I don't need, these library locations. The library location is from a different adventure. I think, indeed, I'm going to take my event card, travel back to the Sanitarium here, and get a much needed sanity check. So I'm going to gain 5 sanity off of my 8. Back to 13, and of course I need, because I have traveled, I need to draw an event and a monster, and I'm here all alone. So that's the, this is the risk I'm taking, because if I get more than 5 sanity damage, it won't have been worth it, but we took the chance, so we'll see. Our event, bury any star event in play, all monsters are invisible. Well, we don't have any star events in play, so that was great. And we're drawing our monster here. Well, not so great. Hound of Tindalos. Add 1 point to the value of this card if your opponent, that's you, is inside. Well, guess what? We are inside. So we have indeed not done so well. We are failing here, and this is going to deal us a damage of 2 sanity, because we can't defend against it in any way. I guess the additional point doesn't really matter. It's just going to deal us these 2 points of damage. So instead of getting a +5, we got a +3, and we're losing 2, so we're back to 11. But at least we regained something, and we will just continue along our merry way. I feel like this video is getting a little long, so I want to just show you before I play the rest of this out off camera and explain what happened. But I do want to just show you how spells work with tomes. We've got, we pulled this ally here who can be played in New York, and I'm playing him in the Sanitarium where we are. Now, he's in the deck really for another adventure, but he's going to be useful to me in this moment to show you how this works. Because we had pulled this spell and played this spell, and you notice there's icons here. This is a skull icon, and it has a meaning, which I'll put up on the video. I can't, let's see. Oh, here we go. The death. It is a death spell. And it is going to be contained in, you're going to need to find it in a tome of, that has the similar iconography to it. And actually, I'm realizing here it's not going to work. Well, let me show you nevertheless how it could work. You have the iconography here of what types of spells can be contained in this tome. You would deploy this tome and at the cost of the sanity here, and that would allow you to cast this spell. And in this case, this is a combat spell where you can basically return a card to the owner's hand, or in the case of how I would interpret that, just ignore the monster that comes out. I'm realizing now, I thought when I was going to show this to you it would work. It's not going to work because this ally here speaks English and understands glyphs, but this spell book is written in French. So indeed, this ally cannot help me. This would not work. So I've got the spell out anyway. I thought I could show you how it would work, but it won't because he can't read the book. So in order for that to work, he would need to read the book. And again, this is part of what I was saying earlier about the challenge of the game, or the really just the game mechanic that comes with trying to play this game. You really do have to match up and spend a bunch of time putting your decks together to make sure they all work. Now, I'm sure I have, well, I know I have, oh, you know what? My investigator knows English and French. There you go. She can read that spell book. So I take it back. He can't. She can. So I could deploy this. I actually could. I could get out the tome and let's just see. Can the tome be played in the Sanitarium? Well, that is the question. No, it can't. I don't think it can. I'll confirm that. Again, a different way of illustrating the same issue. I can read it, but I actually can't deploy it because I'm not in a location that allows me to deploy or to read tomes. And I can show you, looking through my discard pile here, that there are locations that permit that. So, for example, it's thematic. Were I in the church here, I could read a tome. But I can't read a tome in the Sanitarium. I guess that makes sense. You're probably not reading books if you're in there. So, unfortunately, not going to work for that reason because though I can read it, I can't deploy it. So you do need, when building your deck, to have as much interlocking cards as possible. I think they call them joining cards in the parlance of the game rules, and that is part and parcel to getting all the use you can out of them. And one of the things that I try to do when putting the decks together is to make sure that each card has more than one use. So as I mentioned, this comes from a different adventure where I need a steadfast author, but also it would be ideal if he had more than one use. If I had, for example, some spells that were in glyphs. Now, I know that I don't. I only chose English and French spells, but that would have made that potentially more useful. In any event, that's how a spell would work if it could work. And now I'm just going to play the rest of this adventure out off camera and come back and summarize what happened. What seemed like a cakewalk at the beginning of the video for this adventure turned out to be us going insane and losing, and I'll just show you a teeny bit about what happened off camera. Actually, the first thing that happened off camera, right when I stopped the filming play-by-play through, is really what did us in. We were in the Sanitarium. We had our steadfast author here, and he was key to the beginning of our adventure. And we had him with a shotgun. We're all set up, things were going well, and then we pulled this event. And this event caused us to lose an ally of up to 2 points, and he was the only option we had to lose. I guess I could have lost that corrupt cultist who I was trying to hang on to, but it was just it was a choice at that point. Things were not really going well. I was at about 8 or 9 sanity, and then I pulled this event one turn later, which reminded me, because this had to do with phobias, it reminded me I had completely forgotten about my agoraphobia my agoraphobia still being in effect, and I needed to go back as best I could and look back at how I had traveled and decrease my sanity by 1 point for each of those outside travel events. And at that point, I was down to about 4 or 5 sanity. And I continued along, went to some other locations before getting to Providence here at the very end with about 1 sanity left, where I found my doctor who I needed. Happened to be another cemetery. He didn't need to be in a cemetery. He just needed to be in Providence. Per my adventure, I was trying to rescue all these folks, but just as I was getting there, or actually leaving there, I was at 1 sanity and I lost a battle with some monsters, and that was it. So I was able to get my steadfast author, and I found the doctor. I did find the reporter along the way. I don't think I showed you that card. The wife, you remember, we found and then lost. I hung on to the cultist from the cemetery, and I did have a tome as well, but it was incomplete before I died, and therefore that was the end of that game. Now, I had previous to that successfully completed the first adventure, which was moving through various cities, city locations, and ultimately getting an artifact or a tome. I think I got I got an artifact. Yeah, an artifact, and also finding something that cost me a sanity point. So that was the first adventure I had successfully completed, but I was unable to complete the second one that I was just walking you through for the 7-point value, and I'm pretty sure along the way, haven't tallied it up, but I'm almost positive this was just a kind of generic kill 20 points of monsters for 5 points of adventure. Pretty sure I did that, but in the end, only successfully completed 10 points of adventure out of the possible 22 I had going here. Clearly, this is not the Lovecraft-based collectible card game to be seeking out right now if you don't play any of them, but it does offer, at least for me, this was a little bit of nostalgia. It was also a little bit of getting back into a very, very basic kind of deck building. I'm just sort of flipping through some of these cards here so you can see the art. A very basic deck building, deck construction, really, to pull together a play experience that would be interlocking and would provide the kinds of decisions that you saw me making in some of the gameplay. It is, it's not a complicated game, and the mechanics of it are fairly simple, as I said, even just in playing the way that I am, and the basic rules themselves are not much more complex than I showed you here. They may not be written they're not written so clearly, but that too is not so terrible in terms of the basic rule set. The cards are explained pretty clearly, and I think any gamer who has played any type of game off the grid is going to find it pretty easy to get into in that way. What really does take up the time, as I said, is building the deck, and especially if you're working with, I can't really show you all the cards that I have here, but this is just a portion of the cards that I received, and that takes a bit of time to go through and have everything matching up sufficiently so that you're getting the maximum possible use out of the cards as you can, as the cards are designed to show you. Here are some Cairo locations that I'm showing you. I didn't play with this at all in the video. I think the challenge again comes with you want to create some degree of reasonable uncertainty for yourself in a game so that there's actually something to do. And part of the risk of this game is that you can find yourself just sort of sitting somewhere pulling cards and waiting to find the card that you need. And in effect, that is what you're doing when it all boils down to it. It is a very simple game mechanic. So the onus falls on you to create a deck that will be flexible enough to provide you with choices about maybe I should move on to another adventure at the expense of my sanity, and I know I have enough sanitariums in the deck to regain some sanity, so it's worth the risk. I mean, these kinds of things, I think, to build that into the game fall upon the player, because you are creating your deck of cards, and the deck of cards that you create is going to directly relate to the type of decision making that you have in the game, and that will probably directly relate to the enjoyment that you get out of the game. Here are some artifacts. We didn't really show you too many artifacts in the gameplay, but you can see from the breadth of the cards, I mean, they are thematic. We got some brain tablets here. You can allow yourself to get into the game if you are committed to it in that way. I do think some repeats here. I do think that the simplicity of the way the mechanics work can function, at least for a player like me, to make it a little bit harder to get into the theme, because again, it can boil down to basic card flipping and even the combat. There's not a whole lot that you can do. Sure, you want to get some artifacts to help you, looking at some allies, maybe even considering where you are in a location, but the combat itself is fairly basic in terms of what you are facing and even the values on the monsters, as we look here at this Star Spawn of Cthulhu. It's a 5-value monster, and it does have some effects, but again, for you as a player to have the impact of those effects, you have to build your deck such that it would work. So there is, you need that commitment to have that happen. And I guess it's fitting to end the video. I don't recall seeing him. Goody Fowler's Ghost. He's invisible. I didn't go over the invisibility. There's an invisibility value with some of the monsters that I don't use playing solo, but oh, and here's zombies. I didn't realize I actually had zombies. Yes, I know I'm not talking. Just showing you some of the art. It's I have more than one zombie. It's a variable quality, I think, but overall it's pretty good. What's strange about this game to me is this kind of rainbow background to everything, and I don't quite get that. Doesn't scream Cthulhu at me, the rainbow, but that's what I have for you with the Mythos collectible card game from the 90s. It is, if you've got it in your closet, I would say, as a sort of parting words, if you've got it in your closet and you used to play it, or you forgot you had it, or something of that effect, definitely take it out. If you're really, really into the Cthulhu mythos and didn't know this game existed, it might be worth seeking out. For people who are absolutely crazy for collectible card games, here's an old one that's hanging around, and as you can see, there's a lot of content available for it. Thanks for watching.